The Baltimore Ravens continue their OTAs, and Lamar Jackson had some spirited statements about the way he wants to feel during the 2024 season, including his weight drop. We talk about that and so much more coming up next on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here and making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day, for and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube and audio form wherever you get your shows, for 5 days a week of Ravens content here Monday through Friday. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We are back here, a Thursday episode with our Thursday guest, former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver and Super Bowl champion Qadry Ismael. Q, always appreciate you joining me. And of course, we're going to talk about the Ravens and OTAs, Lamar, Derrick Henry. But I want to start off with you and your family. Another congrats in order for me and from everybody watching and listening is the story your son Qadry officially signing with the team. I know it's a step in the direction that you guys want to be in and want to go. And look, he's earned it. He's deserved it. And I'm super happy for you and him and your entire family.
It's official. And I guess that's where, for me, I was sitting back and just like, all right, it'll be official and we can kind of chop it up a little bit with him and his stuff when sign on the dotted line, and what a journey it's been as far as, literally his season at Sanford. Once it ended, we looked at the calendar and I mapped out 16 weeks, which was a full, obviously, NFL season, to where he would be as far as in March and preparing himself for the combines. And looking at all that, heck, he even went to one of the Ravens games. I told him, take as many notes as you can and observe the obvious within the game. And he came back with just detailed information, which I thought was really awesome. But my point is that, he grinded it out and stayed focused, stayed committed to the process, and the process has paid off for him. He's been there looking good and feeling comfortable.
Yeah, the grind continues, and it's exciting. And the Ravens obviously have a history with undrafted free agents and finding ways for them to impact either the active roster or the practice squad. So I hope, Q, I'm really excited, and we're going to see how it all unfolds there. But OTAs continue for the Ravens. We heard from Lamar Jackson, John Harbaugh, Kyle Hamilton, Zay Flowers yesterday on the podium. And we've had this conversation, you and I, a couple of different times and a couple of different iterations. But Lamar Jackson and his weight loss has been very apparent. He has slimmed down for the 2024 season based off of where he was over the past couple of seasons. He said on Complex he was around 230 in 2022, 215 last season. Now he's right around 205. Now, he didn't say exactly where he was yesterday on the podium, and he said that he doesn't necessarily have a pure target weight. But he said he's doing it to feel more agile and be more agile. And it seems to me, Q, and you can maybe attest to this, is there are certain ways that you can prepare your body for the NFL season, but you have to feel comfortable in your own skin and in your own body. So for Lamar, there are benefits to bulking up and adding that extra weight. There are also some cons to that. And it feels like for Lamar, he just feels better when he can be more shifty and have more elusiveness and more agility as opposed to the bulking, which for him, if that's how he feels best, then look, I'm all for it.
Here's the thing that I look back on, and to your point, feeling good, looking good and all that. For me as a former player, obviously getting also an opportunity to talk to, multiple guys over the decades. And within that, you see where guys talk about, hey, we want to gain strength, but within gaining strength, you got to keep your athleticism, you got to keep your mobility and fluidity. And I just thought, when you and I went down this path and going up against the Lamarites that came out of the woodwork when Lamar, those 2 years ago, was talking about gaining weight, I was like, man, he's got to be careful. He's got to do it the smart way. it turned into this big old like, oh my God, how dare you? What do you know? Well, heck, I know an awful lot. And I'm glad that Lamar actually is shedding some of that, the mass of the muscle so he can have the fluidity and the elasticity of the tendon and muscle working together to be that explosive, dynamic player that we all have seen him. And we know that he can continue to be. It's his football IQ that we want him to continue to grow on, not necessarily grow and be big and stiff. That's not what made Lamar Jackson Lamar Jackson.
And I know there are specific points about, oh, well, if he ends up getting injured, it's all because he loses the weight. He lost the weight. Well, he got injured when he was bulked up. I mean, he got injured in 2022 when he was that 230. And to me, it's like injuries happen in the game of football. So I'm not necessarily worried about that. If an injury happens, I'm not necessarily attributing it personally to, him losing weight. Are you at all concerned about that, Q? I know we've had that conversation a little bit, but now for him, we have that target-ish weight of like 2-something. Does that feel to you like it's okay and it's not going to result in an injury?
So there is the non-contact injury, and then there's obviously contact injury. From a quarterback aspect of things, I think the rules are really set in place to help try to limit the non-contact injury as well as the I can't protect myself injury. I thought Lamar, throughout his 6 seasons, has done a remarkable job of protecting himself when he has had the ball and he's gone past the line of scrimmage. I think the times when he's tried to extend the play throwing the ball is where he's gotten injured, whether it be his heel, whether it be his knee, and then obviously the concussion. From a bigger picture aspect of things, I just think a lighter, faster, more nimble Lamar, his kinesthetic awareness, his body's ability to know where it's at in space, his peripheral vision is superior. I mean, that's what makes him a two-time league MVP. It's just his superior way of doing it. So ultimately, I think, being lighter, nimble, and able to leap tall buildings with a single bound, give me this man of steel over the other man of steel with a lot of weight.
Now, Lamar was also asked if he remembers the last time he felt this agile and, him feeling as good as he is right now, moving around. And he said, quote, "Nah, it's been so long. We had COVID and stuff happen to us, slowed us down a little bit, but I feel great right now." It just feels like he hasn't felt this way in a really long. It feels like not that he hasn't trusted himself. I feel like he does, but he tried something. He tried to see how he could play, bulked up a little bit, didn't work. And it just felt like, and I go back to the AFC Championship game. I know we've had this conversation, Q, of that one play where he breaks out to the outside on that 4th down play. And it didn't feel like he trusted himself to beat L'Jarius Sneed down the sideline. So he tried to back juke him and he didn't score the touchdown. We've seen him break down the sideline countless times, break up the middle and beat everybody countless times. But it just didn't seem like that didn't seem like that extra gear was there, is what I'm trying to say. So, I mean, how imperative is it for Lamar to get that extra gear back? Because while you're sacrificing some stuff in terms of him being bulked up and maybe trucking a guy over with that if he can, I think Lamar Jackson, when he's at his best, is probably around the weight he is now, and it feels like he feels that way too.
Yeah, see, I think the one thing you look at with Lamar, he's in a position where, yes, he's highly scrutinized and everything kind of gets magnified, but I applaud him for being reflective on like, when I'm feeling a certain weight or I'm feeling a certain feeling, maybe, it depends on how into it he is and everybody's different. But I feel like, when I'm light, I can move. And that Sneed play, but then I even go back to where everybody was like goo goo gaga over him being elusive in the 49ers game where he shook Fred Warner. Like, I'm like, man, yeah, but he's also scored in the Bengals game, his year when he was, unanimous MVP. because he was able to just keep on going as opposed to, laying down and kind of, not taking an unnecessary hit. And so that's where I think, he has done the work of the examination and the feeling. And to his credit, like when you're losing that means you've had to like really have a good, clean diet. And that goes to show you, he's had the self-discipline to really want to make this happen for himself.
Yeah, and it's just about trusting himself and trusting his body, which I think, that's huge for him to identify. Yeah, this is where I feel the best. I've done it at this weight. I've done it bulked up. I've done it skinny, and this is where he wants to be. So that to me is important. But he also talked a bit about the AFC Championship loss of the Chiefs. Obviously, everybody wants to push it away and push it aside, but it's going to be on the players' minds for a while. And that's what he said. He said, motivated the whole team through the offseason, essentially. He said, quote, us players still talk about it. Definitely left a bitter taste in our mouths just being that close. We worked so hard. Definitely a little chip on our shoulder. And the players aren't going to forget about it. Zay Flowers, there was a lot of that yesterday, Q, where he said he's still not over the loss. And that sticks with you for a while. I mean, I know you being in those moments and, you obviously won a championship, but there were other times where you had to kind of face defeat and face that stare it down right in the face. And so it's a motivating factor, but how motivating can it be entering a new season?
So here's the one thing, and that's a great question. I think it is something where you've heard guys like Michael Jordan talk about, you got to taste the defeat because you won't really understand how to savor the victory. And I think for, Lamar or Zay and other guys, Kyle Hamilton even mentioned it, yes, you want to move forward for sure, but you also want to have that inner, when you're getting just that little bit tired, or you should have looked at that play call one last time, or whatever the minutia might be. Maybe you could have told your teammate a tip to help him be better, and you held back on it. It's the loss that, sticks into your mind that says, you know what? I appreciate, you as a teammate, or, you know what? I think I'm going to do this extra, whatever. It's the mindset that I think you hold on to it without letting it consume you and make it a negative.
And it's big because there are a bunch of different motivating factors throughout a season, and it's not just losses. But when you come that close and you feel like you should win that game, you feel like you're a team that could go all the way and you come up short, I mean, it must be so big to have that extra push and the extra motivating factor where it's not going to be the only thing. I mean, it shouldn't be the only thing that motivates you, but it certainly is up there in terms of how it can impact winning, and hopefully it does. Baltimore's certainly going to remember it. Coming up, though, we'll talk about Jamal Adams a little bit. And the Ravens have not made any official move, but the visit did happen on Tuesday. We'll talk about a little bit more whether it could be the right move or is it the wrong one if the Ravens make it. Stay tuned, plenty to talk about on the show. First, the show is brought to you by Yahoo Finance. And for me, I value financial freedom a ton. And so I've thought to myself a lot, it'd be really great if I could see all my investment and retirement accounts in one place. So 401ks, et cetera. With Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub. And that to me is something I've been looking for forever. So I wanted to grow my portfolio for a while too. And inflation is something that's super crazy, right? Everything's going up in price. So for me, dealing with the rising cost of inflation is a big deal as well. So also paying off some debts, like anything you need. Yahoo Finance, you can get access to the news, data, and tools you need in order to help reach that financial freedom. Now, for more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Plus, you want number ones. They're number one in finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, and so much more. So security is a big thing for me too. Yahoo Finance has that. You can securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including those 401ks and other investments. So with a community of over 90 million users these months, the real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. We're back. Our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Qadry Ismail. Hugh, the big news of Tuesday was the Ravens were visiting with Jamal Adams, former New York Jets safety and former Seattle Seahawks safety. Adams was an all-pro player, Pro Bowl player, but injuries have kind of taken over his last 3 seasons, hasn't had a sack in 3 years, and that was kind of his calling card over the early portion of his career. He's had concussions and a bunch of other lower extremity injuries that have taken a toll. Also has had a couple run-ins with the media, including going after a reporter's wife one time. So some people are a little shocked that the Ravens went this route, especially considering his skill set is not necessarily what the Ravens need at the top of their list in terms of replacing a guy like a Geno Stone. But then the other side of that coin is if they want to use him as a dime backer, it fits essentially because the Ravens aren't married to keeping 2 inside linebackers on the field at all times because Patrick Queen is no longer with the team. So if you want to go back to the dime backer spot, obviously they had Chuck Clark play that role. For a lot of people, and we'll talk about each one of these points individually, but this all honestly goes back to Kyle Hamilton. And you want to use him in a free-flowing role. And Jamal Adams, if that's the only safety you bring in, you can't trust him in too high. So it's going to be interesting to see if they could use Kyle Hamilton all around the field. Would he be your first choice, Q, for safety for the Ravens, or would you look elsewhere for skill set?
You know, it's interesting because he, meaning John Harbaugh, talked about how he and Jamal Adams got a chance to really know each other when they were both at the Pro Bowl and they were riding over via their transportation, the bus together to get to the facility. And, you know, I was like, wow, you know, that's pretty cool, you know, where John would be open to having good, like, depth of conversation to call him, hey, we got to know each other, we're good friends. At the same time, from the mercurialness of him, I'd be curious if the Ravens put him through kind of like the gauntlet of, what kind of guy is he? You know, is he going to fit on our team? And then I'd be curious as to the bigger picture of when you look at his play, is it a ceiling that has been reached? And do you give another young guy who has room to grow opportunity? And they brought in some, you know, free agents and such. So I'm curious as to, like, what's their thinking when it comes to, having Jamal Adams and what are they doing? Are they kicking the tires or are they really serious about it? I guess is the bottom line.
Right. And it almost brings me back to even like the Des Bryant thing a couple of years ago where they had him in for a workout in like July or August or something right before the season started and essentially said, we're going to keep you on our short list for a little bit. And if we need you, we'll call you. And they ended up meeting him. So they called him and that's how that worked out. So is this more of just a, hey, we're kicking the tires and this isn't anything imminent, but maybe October, another injury happens or they feel like they need a dime guy and they call Jamal Adams up? Or is this more of a, we're going to sign this guy and this is going to be the backup safety depth? I don't know what their thinking is. Now, I would be okay, Q, if they were to sign Jamal Adams and then add somebody else with that. If that's a skill set like Geno Stone's, Eddie Jackson, Micah Hyde, Justin Simmons, like one of those types of players to where you can still have that rangy skill set where you can trust those two, meaning Marcus Williams and whoever you bring in too high. You can move Kyle Hamilton as your chess piece around the defense. Then you have Jamal Adams as your backup dime backer that you can put on the field. I'd be okay with that because then you have both skill sets instead of just one. And Adams is arguably the less important of the two. So if you have Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, Jamal Adams, and a fourth guy with Geno Stone's skill set, I'd be cool with that. But right now, your only safety depth is Sanusi Kane, who was your 7th-round rookie, and Bo Braid, who was an undrafted rookie. It at least gives me a little peace of mind they're looking at safety depth because I think that to me is the biggest remaining, or at least one of the biggest remaining needs on the team.
I mean, if I was those other two guys, I'd be like, yo, I'm studying the heck out of my playbook. I'm making sure that, you know, Coach Zoe is liking what he's seeing with me. He feels comfortable as far as me assimilating the defensive calls. I don't feel like the game is too big for me. I'm learning from, you know, the older vets, and shoot, I can play special teams. You know, it's as much as you and I, we get a chance to to really look at the name players, it's also those guys which the Ravens have made a living off of that, really were just guys. And then all of a sudden they blossomed. The Geno Stones of the world, they got opportunity and they took advantage of their opportunities. John Harbaugh brought up in his pressure where, Brandon Stevens was, first brought in as a safety, and he was, thinking a lot and really analyzing. Then all of a sudden he changes over and now he's not thinking as much and he's really out there doing well. I think that's a function of, here's a guy who, understood what it was to grow as a pro, did it when he got his opportunity. Oh, he blossomed. And not saying that Jamal can't be a contributor, but you want to give those young guys in this offseason every single chance they can get to grow and blossom. And like they did with Dez Bryant, if in fact later on you're like, all right, we got to roll the dice, then you roll the dice. But yeah, I think that's how I guess I'm looking at it. Let the young guys in the offseason develop and grow. That's how you get a better top to bottom team. And that's what you want, that top to bottom mentality.
And we're at the end of May here, Q. So there is still plenty of time before the season starts. Obviously, every team is looking to upgrade their roster. So I'm sure by the time we're talking in July or August, right around when training camp starts, there will be a couple more of those free agent safeties off the board. But there is still time to evaluate what you have. Now, I think they still should bring in at least one veteran safety. Doesn't have to be three of them. Don't have to go crazy with it. But I agree where it's, you don't want to just bring in vet after vet after vet for no reason. There has to be some level, some method to the madness. And while I do think, trusting a 7th round rookie and an undrafted guy at the backup safety slots would be bold, I do think their development is key because I think, with a Geno Stone, that was a 7th round guy that a lot of people are like, oh, is he going to be able to contribute? Didn't contribute a ton in his first year. I mean, he got cut twice in his first year. So kind of had to make his way back to Baltimore. But I still think if you add a veteran with Geno Stone's skill set, because out of the two, Marcus Williams and Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams had 5 really healthy years in New Orleans. But then he comes to Baltimore. He's dealt with 2 pretty serious injuries in 2 years. And so while you're not necessarily chucking around the injury-prone label, considering his track record in New Orleans, in Baltimore, it hasn't been the same type of longevity and health that he had there. So if you bring in Jamal Adams, he doesn't fit that skill set. You can't put Jamal Adams in single high. That's Marcus Williams' game. So if you bring in a backup to Marcus Williams and then you get the backup in Jamal Adams too, that's where I'd be feeling a little bit better. But to the other side of your point, it's not just about, the Ravens develop these young guys, because they definitely do. I agree with you. But at the same time, if there's a place where Jamal Adams can maybe resurrect his career, Baltimore has a heck of a track record with doing that too. I mean, Jadeveon Clowney, Kyle Van Noy, plenty of questions about those guys in terms of, what do they have left in the tank? There are questions about their careers up to this point, and there are some weaknesses here that they had both of them, heck of a year for the Ravens last year. So for Jamal Adams, if there's a place that he could get going, get back on track, and maybe repair some of that image, I think Baltimore would probably be that place.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's all well and good to repair the image and flow and all that. I mean, shoot, if I am sitting there and I'm looking, at Jamal Adams talking with Coach Harbaugh, I'm like, my pectoral muscle is feeling really good right now. I don't know. I don't think I'm too kind of worried about missing out on voluntary practice. I think I'm good. I'm glad I'm here. It's Marcus Williams' motivation. It's the idea of when you are a team like the Ravens who have been successful building the roster, you never stop building. Probably the first week of the season is where it finally just like settles and you go. So there's going to be guys that will be on the radar. And right now, Jamal Adams is on everybody's radar.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think there are 2 different schools of thought. It's not the move I'd initially make, but it's about connections. And if Harbaugh feels confident enough in Jamal and Jamal feels like Baltimore's a good opportunity, it could happen. So we'll see how it develops over the course of the rest of the offseason, whether it's immediate, whether it's not, whether it happens at all. We're going to have to see before the season starts. Coming up, though, in the final part of the show, we'll talk a bit more about OTAs, Derrick Henry's role with the team. There's a lot of excitement around him considering all these videos that are surfacing at the workout. So stay tuned. We got a lot to get to on this episode of Locked On Ravens. First, the show was brought to you by Game Time. I've had plenty of frustrating ticket buying experiences, especially to NFL games. Sometimes I wasn't sure if the seats were good. Sometimes I couldn't find last-minute tickets. Other times there were just no good deals at all. But with the last-minute deals, all in prices, use some receipt, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets. Now, for the NFL schedule release, we know a bunch of high-profile games are going to be on the Ravens' schedule this year. The Chiefs in Week 1, opening game of the NFL season. You got the Texans on Christmas, a bunch of AFC North, what should be really good games there too. And I'd love to go to all those games. Those would be awesome to go to. And on the Game Time app, they're a number one place to go and look for tickets, and especially NFL ones. Now, on the Game Time app, there are so many different features that I have absolutely loved, such as last-minute deals. You can stay up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. But also the Game Time app experience, it just makes it, they make it so easy over there. You get flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing, seat views, lowest price guarantee, Game Time ticket coverage. There are so many features that make the ticket buying experience so easy. And plus, you get plenty of great deals over on Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Down the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off first purchase. Simplify again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spell LOCKEDO on NFL for $20 off. Down the Game Time app today, last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We are back with Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher and Qadry Ismail still talking Ravens football with you here on this Thursday. Derrick Henry has been the center of a lot of excitement this offseason for Baltimore, especially considering he was pretty much their big offseason acquisition in the free agent period. There really wasn't any other guy that you can really point to at this point, but he's a player that's just so polarizing next to Lamar. We saw his first handoff from Lamar. Ravens put out a video or multiple of him and Roquan walking out. Those are essentially your two enforcers, for lack of a better word there, offense and defense, is Derrick Henry and Roquan Smith. But for Henry, there's been a lot of questions about what his role is going to be, how many carries the Ravens are going to give him, and what it should be. Well, this is the Ravens' first pure bell cow back in a little while. I think gone are the days of the Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins split. Greg Roman can have fun with that over in Los Angeles with those LA Ravens. Yeah. But for me, it's like he's just such a good player where there are going to be questions about, is the workload going to catch up to him? Is he going to hit that 30-year-old wall? But he has taken, again, I've never seen a workload like his and the health consistently that he's had. Now, hopefully that continues in Baltimore. He has had so many carries over the course of his career. He's been so effective. And plus his body composition, the way he's built with the strength and the underrated speed, pairing him with Lamar, I mean, I think this is going to be at least like a 17-plus carry guy, 16-plus carry guy for the Ravens. And considering how much they run the football, that should probably shock no one.
I think it's a situation where because you have him, and it's cool because you're going to have him fresher than fresh first week of the season against the Kansas City Chiefs at Kansas City. I think because you have him, it is an easy thing for him to get going early and then establish, you got to stop me kind of a mindset, which then opens it up for Lamar, lighter, faster, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Then it's going to open it up for Likely and Andrews, which then, of course, it opens it up for Bateman and Zay. I think those are the things that I'm looking at when you see a guy like a Derrick Henry, knowing that it's going to be powerful, knowing that it's going to be a situation where let him get off to a strong start. And, bell cow is the tip of the iceberg as far as just what he's going to bring to the table for this Baltimore Ravens offense.
And they're going to have to rely on him even more at the start of the season, as we got a Keaton Mitchell update from John Harbaugh during OTAs, during his podium availability yesterday, said that he's on schedule in the recovery. And so, you'd like to hear that, but he's not going to be back for training camp, not going to be expected back, before sometime during the season. It's not like it's right around the corner, John Harbaugh said. So, to be expected in a way, Q. I mean, I don't think anybody was expecting him to jump up and be 100% for training camp, but based off of, and we've talked about this in terms of what a potential timeline is, you and I have had that conversation. Did Harbaugh's answer shock you at all?
It didn't, because I mean it's an ACL. It's it's a situation where rehab has gotten so much better, and the way in which guys come back from it has been superior. Heck, even the surgery itself is not as invasive as it used to be. I mean, heck, before my time, it was a career ender. During my time, it was definitely an 18 to 22 month type of injury. But you've seen where from the Adrian Peterson days forward, where guys, if they rehab it correctly and they nutritionally have those nutrient dense type foods, mother of pearl, like you can get back well. I think for him, I wouldn't even want to rush it coming back. Remember, he didn't play till the Seattle game. And Seattle's defensive front, if you remember, they were like one of the upper tier best defenses. And I mean, running by fools. My point is, when you got speed, you lose a little bit of it as the season goes on. You get a little fatigued. Could you imagine a fresh legs, ready to go Keaton Mitchell later in that stretch run? And then you talk about what is it? 3 games in 10 days. Yep. The Kyle Hamilton math of the game on the 25th and then the game on the 15th, he said, and carry the one and multiply by the dividend of. But the point is that a fresh Keaton Mitchell, my goodness, man, like you just, we'll have our own version of Fast Willie Parker running down a football field, running this team to the Super Bowl with Derrick Henry, and it'll be a great thing.
Talk about reinforcements. That is one heck of reinforcement to have coming down the pipeline. So he can take his time, because I feel like with Derrick Henry, Justice Hill, even Rasheen Ali in there a little bit, Keaton's a huge part of the offense, and he should be when he gets back. But, bringing in a Derrick Henry definitely alleviates some of the concern for where, they need Keaton Mitchell back immediately. That he can take his time, and you obviously don't want to rush those things too. Now, in terms of who was at OTAs versus who wasn't, guys who were not at OTAs or that they weren't seen participating, Deontay Hardy, Bo Braid has an ankle thing, Justin Tucker, Emory Jones, the new quarterback Baltimore signed, Nelson Aguilar, Marcus Williams, Keaton Mitchell with his knee, he was in street clothes, Adisa Isaac has a hamstring that popped up, Kyle Van Noy, Patrick McCary, Rashad Nichols, and Bravion Roy, and then it later came out that the Ravens ended up releasing Bravion Roy. Now, Pierce was there, he was watching as I talked about, but something else that's very interesting, Q, is all offseason people have been wondering about the role of Malik Cunningham. And what is that going to look like? What is that going to be? Well, it seems like he's completely out of the quarterback picture altogether now, because he's working with the wide receivers. It feels like, at this point, Baltimore seeing what they have in him. Obviously, the athletic profile is there. People were wondering, is he the heir to the backup, the heir to Tyler Huntley to be Lamar's backup? But it seems like that ship has sailed, and Cunningham is working with the wide receivers. Is that safe to say in your mind? Is there any shot you think he returns back to the quarterback room, or is this a pretty permanent transition, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's permanent. I think that, he's in a situation where there's so much that goes into quarterbacking, and whatever they did to give him that opportunity, it is a situation where for him, it didn't work out. Now, like the Ravens are saying, like, hey, you can stay. And in staying, like, look at the opportunity to develop as a receiver. And if you can develop as a receiver, cool. Like, let's keep on going. So I think in that, he made a business decision for himself for longevity purposes, and I can't fault him for it.
Nope. I 100% cannot either. So that's going to be something to monitor too. But let's revisit something we talked about. I think it was last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. Time is escaping me. I don't know where the time is going and what day we're on right now. It's crazy how busy things get. But we talked a little bit about, and there was a question asked on my live stream when the Chiefs game was announced about the preseason. And since the Ravens are going to have that opening game, does that impact how the Ravens could go about working their preseason with the starters and figuring things out in terms of, do you give them more time? Do you give them more run? Maybe an extra series? Do you play them for a quarter? Well, we know that the Ravens are going to be in Green Bay. They're going to have 1 day of joint practices there, but there are no other joint practices planned at the moment beyond that 1 day with the Packers. So they're going to have that one joint practice on Thursday. They'll play the Packers in the last week of the preseason on Saturday. Now, you made a great point, Q, and said, well, if they're going to have joint practices, then that essentially can almost act as your preseason for starters in a way, because it's going up against other opponents, this, that, and the other. But knowing it's going to be 1 day of joint practices and that's all that's planned right now, does that change your opinion at all in terms of maybe they do need to play these guys in the preseason a little bit?
So the joint practice, yeah, it is interesting that it's only 1 day. At the same time, I think it'll be good. I think it'll be good to kind of go up against another team, get some good situational. Maybe this is a intensive 1 day practice, joint practice thing for the Jordan Loves and the Lamar Jacksons of the world to kind of, Zach Orr gets his final groove. I'm not sure who the defensive coordinator is for the Packers, but yeah, it's a situational type of scrimmaging that really, I think, is almost better than, for the veterans, better than a preseason game. Because you can do all of the backs of the wall, zone, goal line area. You can do your red zone. You can do your blitz packages. You can do so much, that you probably aren't going to really get a chance to do when it comes to preseason games, because the game is going to dictate everything. So I you know what? Honestly, I think the first game they should legit, play everybody but Derrick Henry. And matter of fact, I wouldn't play Derrick Henry. Probably the only thing I would consider for Derrick Henry would be the joint practice. And even in that, be limited. But that's it. I'm like, all right, Derrick, appreciate you, brother. We'll see you in Kansas City when you're dominating. Everybody else, including number 8, everybody else is on deck. Maybe not Keaton Mitchell. But like, if 8 is out there, so is Ronnie Stanley. Everybody is out there, except for the King. We'll see ya, Kansas City. Yeah, that's what I would do.
If they need a Derrick Henry stand-in, maybe, I'm sure Devonta Freeman's available if they want to bring him in. See if he can earn that extra roster spot before Keaton comes back. I'm sure he'd be willing to do it. So
maybe he has lost some weight and he's down to pedestrian weight, and it'll be hard for him to get back in the groove.
he and Lamar did that training regimen together this offseason. Maybe Devonta a little more so than Lamar, but we're gonna see. It's a balance, right, of being able to make sure your players are good to go and in a groove before the season starts, but also making sure they're resting enough and not put in quote unquote harm's way, which I know, especially since J.K. Dobbins and that injury a couple of years ago, John Harbaugh it's just shifted across the NFL. It's really shifted. A bunch of starters aren't playing in the preseason anymore. It's not just a Ravens thing, but going to be curious to see with that Thursday night game, what they decide to do ahead of week 1. But Q, I appreciate you. Thanks so much for hopping on. As always, tell people where they can find you, what you're working on, and what you have going on.
So it's all about missile training. You can look at missiletraining.com website and check out what literally, it doesn't matter the age, sports performance or human movement. We're all about it, from 6 years old all the way up to 85-year-olds, and we get it done. We help people move better. At the same time, you can also find me technically on Sunday, WJZ. I'll be having my Purple show, and we will be talking all things Ravens. So you can see me Purple pregame during the football season, and you can also see me with Kevin Allstriker on Locked On Ravens. We break it all down each and every week.
That's right, we do. If you want to see Q, get more of him, of course, check him out over on his website, check him out on TV, and check him out right here on Locked On Ravens. The links to Q's work in the description down below as always, so be sure to go support Q and all that he does. But I appreciate you as always, Q. Thank you so much, and thank everybody for tuning in here to Locked On Ravens, whether you're an everyday or first-timer, somewhere in the middle. Thank you for the support. Be sure to subscribe, follow along, video form, audio form. We have you covered Monday through Friday. Same show as well, so you're not missing out on any content either way. Coming up tomorrow, I'll be rounding out the week with more Ravens content. As always, stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.